easily my most anticipated game of 2025 has finally shown up here in the final week of November. I have been awaiting this since I learned last year how to play bar. This is the latest entry into the system. I believe this is going to be the ninth, 10th game. I'll have to double check that. In any case, it is the Battles for Quebec. I've been really excited about this game because it is going to be probably, with what is left in print, the best game to learn bar with due to its small footprint. And the variety in this package is actually awesome. Typically, Battles from the Age of Reason games do come with multiple scenarios for the battle that they're covering. Typically, they are usually one battle. There have been a few games in the series that are multiple battles. We saw that with Mulvitz and Katusic, two separate battles from the War of Austrian Succession. You saw that the Fontenoy box came with a small sort of half-map game called the Battle of Mel. I've done that on the channel. And then Brandywine and Germantown from the American Revolution all came together in the same box. But this is another one of those sort of small box, small footprint, lower scope games that covers a bunch of different stuff from this era. And it's all centered around the city of Quebec, as we can see here on the cover. We've got the old town up on the heights there. This is the St. Lawrence. You've got these ships here in the water, presumably British ships that were sort of blockading the city for the French Navy from reaching them to help them during the battle. So there's three battles in this box. There is the Plains of Abraham. This is the classic sort of climax of the French and Indian War. This is the French versus the British on the plains outside the town that sort of decided the end of that war. We've got the Battle of Sainte-Foy, which was 6 months later, thereabouts, and this was sort of the final French resistance to the British in the Quebec region. So that's in the box. This is something that's not gamed a lot. It's little known. It was I believe a British victory, and it was sort of like the last gasp of the French military. Most people say, hey, French and Indian War is over when Quebec falls in 1759, but this was the French sort of counterattack on the city. Primarily, I think, using a lot of French-Canadian provincial troops. And then the thing that I've been most excited for in this box, because there are very, very few games on this topic, and that is the Assault on Quebec, 31st of December, 1775. This is Benedict Arnold's, sort of the closing action of Benedict Arnold's march on the city from Maine, where he took 1,200 men up the Kennebec River in Maine and marched overland to get to the city, and he finally shows up. It was a massive thing, and I'll talk about this a little more as we unbox it, but he shows up at the city with about half the number of troops he left with, and they try to make an assault on the city in like a blinding snowstorm, and against like a very small British garrison in the city. There's not a lot on this topic because it was such a lopsided affair with a lot of like special conditions that you wouldn't normally expect, but I think it's a really interesting part of the American Revolution that we don't get quite a bit. So Battles for Quebec from Clash of Arms, Battles from the Age of Reason. Let's take a look at what's inside. We've got two thematic colored dice, white for the French, sort of a magenta purple, I guess, for the British, sort of a pastel. Here we have the rule book. Now, the first thing I notice about this, Battles of the Age of Reason, Volume 10, there's the answer. Volume 10, we have reached double digits for Battles in the Age of Reason. I, for one, couldn't be happier. So this is actually a really big step up for Battles in the Age of Reason. This rule book, full color cover, typically games in this series have had really a pure black and white sort of matte printing on all of their documentation. So I'm really happy to see the visuals upgraded here. We've got what looks to be a historical sort of forced deployment map of the Plains of Abraham here. Looks to be the British and the French facing off against each other. I guess this would be the French line here because we've got the ramparts of the city, and then the British here, who they scaled the cliffs down over in this direction, and then they came up. The French met them outside the city for one decisive battle, and of course, the British ended up winning and ended the French and Indian War in North America for the most part. So I'm going to flip this open. So first time I think we've really seen color in one of these. Maybe Mulvitz and Katusic had a color playbook as well. Yeah, so there's 7 scenarios in the game. Here they are right here. We'll talk about those as we get there. So here's the special rules unique to this game. Looks to be there's some special terrain here. We've got buildings, tidal flats, some plowed fields, some wetlands, so some stuff that's unique to this part of the world. This is, by the way, I think the third Battles from the Age of Reason game taking place in North America. The other two were other American Revolution titles. There was Germantown the Germantown game in Brandywine, and then there was Monmouth. So this is a nice welcome back to the continent. Yeah, so we've got all the terrain here. Here's the special event results. So really, these rules here, you're only going to need to look up when you roll those special events on the beginning of turn event dice. I'm curious to see how those affect. So in actuality, not very many special rules, really about 8 pages of special rules, and that's if you don't count sort of this. So really only about 6 pages of special rules for the game, which makes it a really great starting point, I think, for playing Battles from the Age of Reason. Certainly, I think the Fields of Abraham scenario, Plains of Abraham scenario, because it is a traditional sort of line-on-line battle of this era. The Assault on Quebec has like a whole bunch of different stuff going on from what I've seen. So here we go, scenarios. First scenario. We have got, there are 2 or 3 scenarios for each of the battles represented in battles for Quebec. So this is talking about, okay, here we go. Here's scenario 1. We've got the Plains of Abraham. This is the historical English versus French out front of the town. This one says, recreates the historic battle. It is a quick scenario with little chance of the French winning. So naturally unbalanced. You're probably going to get a historical result out of this. This basically starts with the deployment set up for you, and then you'll play through to the conclusion of the battle. You've got the special rules. Really just one page for this battle. Then we've got Montcalm's response. So this is a scenario that depicts what would have happened on the 13th of September, 1759. It gives both players, but especially the French, far more latitude for action. It is a more even fight than scenario 1. So this sounds like it's a more sort of open deployment scenario that allow the French to kind of set their defense and have the British marching to the site of the battle. So if you wanted to see if you can sort of alternate history with how the battle kind of came to be, this would be the scenario that you could play. Probably much more of a fun contest, which I think is cool. That's the one I mostly want to play when I get that battle to the table. Here we have the Battle of Sainte-Foy. The scenario shows the Battle of Sainte-Foy as the 2 armies are about to make contact. This is looking a pretty long scenario, 9 a.m. to 5:40, keeping in mind that 20-minute turns here. We'll look at the counters in a second, but it looks like the scenarios use different counters. So this is about 6 months after. This is the French counterattack. We've got scenario 4, the Lucky Minute. So this scenario shows the Battle of Sainte-Foy at the point when General Murray saw an opportunity of smiting the French as they were forming up for the battle. So this starts at the 8 a.m. turn and lasts at 5:40. So it looks like it's a longer scenario, potentially with different counters. Historically, Murray may have intended to defend the but à Neveu, but he chose to leave the security of that position to attack. So maybe a more British defensive posture on that scenario. Be curious to see how that lines up. We've got scenario 5, a passion for glory. This scenario starts with the British marching from Quebec with almost all the French still off the map. This lets the British explore different options, so more of a march to battle scenario. Starts even earlier in the day, 7 a.m. So if you want a really long scenario there. Here's scenario 6, the assault on Quebec. So this is Benedict Arnold's assault on the city during the Revolutionary War, the opening year of the Revolutionary War. This scenario is the historical American assault on Quebec at the point of the American attack. The battle is fought in a blizzard, which makes for a bolded, very different bar gaming experience. I'm very keen to see how this plays out on the table. Benedict Arnold only had about 600 men when he got to the city, so I imagine it's a very small counter density, and also a lot of urban street fighting, because I think, from what I recall, I think the British garrison at the city was like 300 to 400 people, so really, really small numbers of men and fighting it out in the streets and whatnot. As you can see, a lot more special rules here for what's going on there. And then there should be a scenario 7. Yeah, this goes all the way there. And then scenario 7, the 14th colony. This is, if Quebec falls, the last British bastion in Canada will be taken, and it will be secured as the 14th colony. This scenario allows latitude for the Americans to vary their attack and the British their defense. It features hidden movement to try and best recreate the confusion and unknowing of the morning. That's really cool. So this would be, again, probably a march to battle scenario where you get some hidden movement options, which is pretty neat. This one, so it uses hidden force markers. I'm just curious how long, like what turns it uses, like if it's a longer scenario or not. So that's pretty cool. Maybe it's the same scenario with hidden movement. Then we've got the historical narrative here. This is going to be the history of all of these battles, and we've got some design notes, so short design notes, which I'm really excited to read. Here's a look at how you read the counters, how you read the loss charts, and some of the system markers here. Rule book really nicely done. Let's take a look at the map here. We'll get that open in a second, but I just do want to point out that the town of Quebec here, lovingly rendered in Clash of Arms style. A really nice color palette to this game. Look forward to opening that. Here we've got the counters. I believe there's only one counter sheet in this game. Battles for Quebec. Here we can see what look to be British, some artillery. These look to be French units here in brown. Some markers. We've got some French artillery. Again, the counters in this system really make it a work of art on the table. We've got what appear to be down here. These must be Americans. This must be... Yeah, I don't know. These must be Americans, I believe. Let's see if we can find a leader that would give us an indication. Usually the names are on the back. The counters are two-sided in this system, which for some people doesn't work. Okay, so these are actually, here's Governor Carleton. So yeah, so these are going to be British, probably British provincials. You can tell by the little letter there. Some leaders, some replacement leaders. Here we have some more French. Some of these are going to be native. Oh, these brown ones must also be provincials, given the little hat, which look to be like the Canadian provincial hat there. I'm curious where the Americans are on here, because obviously we're going to have some... Yeah, here we go. So these right here. Here's Dearborn. He was there. The first Yorkers, New York Muskets. We've got some native allies there. There were some guides. Let's just take a look. That's going to be... Yeah, so all of these in here are your American forces. As you can see, 2 rows of counters. That's it. 2 rows of counters for, and they're very low value for that matter, increments wise. So that's all you're going to need for the battle. Here is the forces display, and this is it right here, the Plains of Abraham. Here's the French army. Here's Wolfe's British army. This is the battle. One of the smaller bar games that you're going to see. And on the back, we've got the Battle of Sainte-Foy, Murray versus Lévis. Again, a smaller even, probably by about 30% for that scenario. So these will be quick playing. I mean, bar is not a fast game to play, but these will be quicker playing than your giant 7 Years' War titles. And here's the assault on Quebec. So here's the American attackers. Here's the British defenders. Not very many units at all, many of which are 1 increment. So yeah, I guess Arnold might be him here. Look, I mean, the leadership here is quite terrible, 0 rating. So that's the force pool, and we've got the booklet for the charts and tables. So you're looking at a lot of stuff in here. It makes bar seem very intimidating. These are the special event results that you can possibly roll at the start of a turn. Leader losses, pursuit special results, and then here's your close combat when both sides get a sort of a hand-to-hand melee. You never really want that if you're outnumbering the opponent. Here's the close combat results table and how you use it. Fire combat. Again, these are in color. I've never had charts in a bar game be in color like this, so this is awesome. Really stepping it up. Congratulations to Matthew Hinkle and Clash of Arms on this one. Disorder check summaries. You're going to use this page a lot because there's different things in the game that will cause you to take disorder checks. Different statuses, different phases of the game in combat where you might have to check disorder. And then here's the special results. So sometimes when you make a check, you might get a special result, which can further enhance the narrative of the game. There's just a lot of stuff that happens in bar that I really love. You're never quite sure what's going to go on. The battlefield feels definitely out of your control. Morale check, which is different than disorder. Here's the morale check special results. And then we've got the loss chart. So typically you're going to want to make a copy of this page if you're using the loss charts for the game. You've got all the different formations, and then how many losses they can possibly take, and then a total loss here, and that's going to determine whether or not you suffer adverse effects as the battle continues. Here's the Plains of Abraham. It looks like the British. These are the French. And then here's Sainte-Foy. Interestingly, there isn't one for Assault on the City itself by Benedict Arnold, which is interesting. Here is the Assault on Quebec rules, reminders, and charts. It looks like we have some different special results for this scenario, plus a lot of special stuff for this scenario in terms of like how you play the game, leader activation summary. So it might change up the core system quite a bit. And then on the back, we've got the terrain effects, the fire combat chart, which is done in sort of a range multiple situation. You can see the way the chart is here. French units versus British units. I mean, for British foot times 4 at range 1. You're really only getting that with line infantry here of the French. Most units are not able to even shoot more than 1 hex. I guess they're muskets. So yeah, again, very excited for this. Here is the formation change or the facing change diagram. So when you are marching in this game and you make a directional change, different nations will cost different movement points to make that change when they're formation changing. Part of the simulation aspect of Battles in the Age of Reason to represent the drilling of the troops of the period. And then here is all of the diagrams for what sort of like, depending on what formation you're in, what front, flank, and rear looks like, along with the hex facing cost changes there. We have got a cardstock hidden forces display. That's probably going to be used for the assault on Quebec. We've got a bar primer advertisement. If you like Battles in the Age of Reason or you want to learn the system, highly recommend you pick up the bar primer from Clash of Arms. It's a really great resource for learning the game. The only downside is that a lot of the examples use the Fontenoy as their sort of examples to like help play through. And if you don't own Fontenoy, you can't do that. But it's still relevant for the entire series, and it comes with all of the charts, I believe, in it for the core system, which is really handy. Here's another hidden forces display. Okay, so we do have another counter sheet here. These are just going to be the system markers. These are looks like the hidden forces counters. Here we've got the strength reductions. And then this is the first time I've actually seen this, and I really, really love what they've done here. So you've got shaken markers in yellow. You've got disorder markers on the back in pink, and then you've got shaken disordered here as like a split color. This is fantastic. They should have done this a long, long time ago. This allows you to see at a glance what status your units are in. Typically, historically, these markers have been the same black and white, like no color on them. So when you're looking at the battlefield at the end of a turn to figure out who's going to rally, who needs to rally, who's going to break, you had to like look very closely because the counters were all black and white. Now that they put color on them, this is going to make the visual cueing of the state of the board a lot better. I really like that they've done this routed here in orange, so you'll know looking at the board what state the units are in. I really love this. I hope that the next bar game does this as well and provides some extras on a counter sheet so that we can use some of these colored markers for older games in this series. That's going to help playability quite a bit. And then finally here we've got the Battles from the Age of Reason Rules of Play 3rd edition. I believe these are 3.4, so this is the newest version of the rules. According to Matthew Hinkle, the designer, 3.4 is made just some very, very minor changes to like 1 or 2 sections. And if you have version 3.3 from Malvitz and Katusitz or one of the games that had 3.3 in it, you can basically use those to play this. You don't need this. It looks like there's more actually diagrams and illustrations in here than I remember in other versions of the rules. It looks like it's maybe laid out a little differently. I'm gonna have to go through this again. It'll start to come back to me once I kind of get into it, but it is not, I mean, as you can see, it's 50 pages. It is not a simple system. There's a lot of detail here, but it is quite worth it in my opinion. And then at the bottom here, we've got what looks to be Against the Odds magazine ad. You can see La Bataille de Colm, which just came out, and one of their little postcard games. Showtime Hanoi. This is a Vietnam postcard game. Rules on the back, counters on the side, and you play it on this grid. Great, so let's spread out the map so we can see it in all its glory. All right, here we go. We've got the Battles for Quebec map. We've got the turn track here in the upper left. And here on the bottom of the map, we've got the St. Lawrence River. We've got the city here. And I showed you a little bit earlier, but we'll get in a little bit closer so you can see some of the gardens and farmland as we get into the city on the heights. Here's the center of the city, way up here on the cliff. Here are the bastion, the walls of the city. Walls along this direction as well on the riverside. I just really love the art. All of the locations are named. La Potasse, Faubourg-Saint-Roch. Here's the St. Charles River. Here's the Compass Rose. And then, of course, outside the city, we've got the Plains of Abraham. This is where the British line was somewhere in here. The French line was somewhere in here. The British came up the cliffs down further this way. And I believe one of the scenarios has the British coming onto the map from that direction. And then they came up, and then they lined up here, and they fought on the plains, and within 20 minutes or something like that, both Wolfe and Montcalm were dead, and the French were routed in retreat, and that was the end of French power in North America. So very, very excited to get this to the table. Interestingly, all 3 battles can be played on this map. It looks like Sainte-Foy also is played on this map, and then, of course, when we get to Benedict Arnold's assault on the city, I believe I forget exactly which direction he entered, I don't know if it was in this direction or this direction, but anyways, they sort of converged on the city. There was a blizzard. They were fighting through these streets. It's going to be a great time. Really, really excited. I'm going to try and play this before the year is over and get maybe some content on the channel. But this is the newest game in the Battles from the Age of Reason, Battles for Quebec. A really unique game and a really beautiful game for that matter. Here's just some of the artwork on the cover inside. There's Colonel Benedict Arnold. There's Gouverneur Général Pierre de Rigaud de Vaudreuil de Cavagnal. There's Guy Carleton, governor during the Revolutionary War. Richard Montgomery, the American. James Murray, Chevalier de Levis. François Gaston Chevalier de Levis. And there's Wolfe. And the Marquis de Montcalm, all the famous players of this. The last thing I want to leave you with is if you're interested in the history of this era, specifically of the assault on Quebec, this novel is phenomenal. It's pretty well known. It was written in the 1920s by Kenneth Roberts, who did a lot of research on the campaign that Benedict Arnold went on. So it's called Arundel or Arundel, depending on how you pronounce it. It is the view of the Benedict Arnold expedition to Quebec in 1775, as told by a fictional character who gets hired as a guide to help guide the army in the crazy overland march and river paddle march that they did up the Kennebec River, across the highlands of western Maine, and then down into Quebec proper. It is a fantastic book. It's really well written. It's got a really great flavor, a really great picture into what it could have been like to be there during this entirely Herculean effort by 1,200 American soldiers to assault British Canada. It should be pretty easily available. I believe it comes in and out of print, but it's a phenomenal book if you really just want like something that is part history, part like narrative fiction. Highly recommend this. It's a great look at the campaign, and this book is actually what made me want a game about this particular event, and I'm so happy now that these are united here in my collection, and we'll be playing it very soon. So thanks for watching this. Looking forward to bringing you content on this for the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.